Welcome, everybody. I'm Beth Wingate, president of Lofeld Consulting Group, an APMP fellow, former CEO of APMP International, and former president of the APMP National Capital Area chapter. I've been with Lofeld Consulting for almost 17 years now. I've managed proposals for small, mid-size, and large government contractors for over 30 years, including training teams on proposal best practices, writing sections of the APMP body of knowledge, and co-writing 7 books on capture and proposal best practices. I'm finishing up our 8th book right now, and it's focused on GenAI, so stay tuned. I'd like to welcome our presenter today, Bruce Feldman, Lofeld Consulting's Vice President for AI. Bruce, over to you.
Beth, thank you very much for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bruce Feldman. As Beth said before, Lofeld Consulting Group Vice President for AI. I also teach our class on generative AI for proposal professionals. I've got over 30 years of business development, capture proposal experience working for DoD and the intelligence community. I'm retired from the Air Force with a master's degree in electrical engineering. And in my previous job, I was a senior vice president at SCIC for business development for the national security and space sector. This presentation is about generative artificial intelligence from the point of view of the business development, capture, and proposal profession. This is the second part of a 2-part webinar series. In webinar series part 1, we already talked about what we've learned from a year and a half of using generative AI to do proposal-related work. In this webinar, number 2, the second part of the series, we'll be talking about our vision of the future, what we think is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years in using generative AI to do proposal and GovCon-related work. What you see here is a summary from the webinar number 1 presentation. On the left, you see our view of the industry BD lifecycle, and in areas where today, over the last year, we have already experienced using generative AI to do proposal-related work. In the pre-final RFP release phase, we have a number of activities we've supported, including solutioning continuation, supporting capture artifact development, helping develop a proposal management plan. After the final RFP is released, we do proposal activities, we analyze the RFP, create a proposal outline, do content planning, writing, graphics. We use generative AI for a number of these tasks in support of our customers. Post-submission, you can also use generative AI to support closure activities, including post-submission lessons learned, award negotiations, and protest support activities. Over the last year, we've developed 39 use cases where we assisted our customers in using generative AI to do proposal-related tasks. That led us to conduct a study where we benchmarked different generative AI platforms and using them on a sample set of proposal-related tasks so we could do comparisons of how to use different platforms for different tasks. As you can see in the chart here, we used an AI chatbot, we used 5 different public platforms and 2 different private or secured platforms. We developed prompts and scenarios and output formats. We didn't use any proprietary data. We developed performance benchmarks and ran each scenario against each platform 3 times using a new session. So data from previous conversations with the chatbot wouldn't taint or affect the output. We scored each scenario and developed overall assessments of how public platforms compared with private secured generative AI platforms designed for GovCon-related work. That report is available to you on the Lofeld website. It was completed in January of this year. To support this study effort, we defined 8 representative proposal assistance tasks. These are the kind of tasks you would perform in support of your proposal activity, both pre-RFP and after the final RFP is released. It included idea generation, drafting proposal narrative, integrating and analyzing data into your narrative, checking for compliance, how you can optimize language and tone for your proposal narrative, getting editing and revision suggestions, answering questions that you might receive in the course of receiving engineering notifications or other customer requests for clarification, and formatting and presentation. And again, these scenarios were representative. No proprietary data was used. So our study construct had those 8 specific proposal assistance tasks. We ran each of them against each platform 3 times, each time in a new session. We used ChatGPT 4 to research and develop the benchmarks and then to score the proposals with review from a test manager. We use external benchmarks whenever available. And the example I give here on the chart is the Flesch-Kincaid reading ease metric, which is used for assessing readability. Or we had benchmarks we developed using ChatGPT 4 to score on a scale of 1 to 5. And what you see on the right is an example of one of the benchmarks we developed for one of the scenarios. All ChatGPT 4 assessments were reviewed by the test manager, and in some cases, the test manager reviewed and overruled the ChatGPT 4 assessment. This is one of our example proposal assessment tasks, drafting proposal narrative. In this case, we gave the generative AI platform a draft proposal, not enough to clog the context window, but certainly enough to process, and requested that it provide us with an executive summary. We gave it instructions on how to write the executive summary. And so in scoring it, we looked at readability, as well as its compliance with the guidelines that we gave it for doing the executive summary. We also looked at the similarity of runs using a semantic search tool called cosine similarity algorithm in order to see whether or not variations in the language in different responses led to significant differences in the meaning and the content of the output provided. And what you see is the example data for one of the platforms that we tested. We did it for all 3 responses and then averaged the results. Let me share some general findings from our benchmark study with you. First of all, we saw that private domain-aware platforms designed for GovCon proposal work, generally speaking, did as well or better than well-known public platforms. They also had the added advantage of protecting your proprietary data from corruption, leakage, reuse for AI training, and retention after engagement. These platforms are designed expressly for GovCon proposal work. As you can see on the right, we had our 5 public platforms that we tested. We also had 2 secured private platforms that we tested. And generally speaking, the private platforms performed as well or better than the public platforms. You notice that some of the public platforms, by the way, have evolved significantly. The accelerated pace of evolution in generative AI is astonishing. So now in ChatGPT 3.5, we have version 4.0 Turbo. Instead of Google Bard, we have Google Gemini. Instead of Claude Instant, we now have Claude 3 in 3 different versions, and so on. The pace of change in the field is immense. But the obvious takeaway is that platform selection matters. It depends on the task that you perform. You can get very different results. The trade space that leads you to is that performance versus cost versus risk is a key part of your decision process when you select your generative AI platform. Let me give you some findings from some of the specific proposal assistance tasks that we ran. Proposal assistance task number 1 was idea generation. We asked GenAI to come up with ideas related to system engineering and information technology. Those ideas needed to fall in one of 4 different evaluation criteria, with the added request that the idea be innovative. We were surprised to see that the innovativeness of the ideas varied from 0% to 50% of the ideas receiving a maximum score of 5 on an innovation scale. Generative AI can function as a subject matter expert if the platform is trained on the subject matter at hand. For proposal assistance task number 2, drafting proposal narrative, we saw a surprising amount of variability in drafting an executive summary from proposal narrative. Specifically, 2 of the public platforms are unable to respond entirely. What that tells us is that when you are selecting your generative AI platform, you want benchmarking data to make sure your platform can do things the way you want them to. For data analysis and integration, and for compliance checking, all of the platforms performed very well, analyzing data and inserting a summary paragraph into a narrative. And in the case of compliance checking, checking for 4 different categories of compliance submission in the response. It is worth noting that generative AI is notoriously bad with numbers. Now, that's something that's, I think, a feature of the current generation of AI platforms, but it is emerging, and I think will change rapidly here over the next few years. But for the moment, one of the takeaways is that you don't want to use generative AI to generate, for example, complex pricing data tables where you have to cut across contract performance periods, fiscal years, and calendar years. For proposal assistance task number 5, language and tone optimization, all of the chatbots performed well. That's not a surprise because generative AI platforms, generally speaking, write beautifully. We can set a language and tone, have a consistent output when we're working on a proposal. That can be done by proposal managers at the onset of proposal writing. Proposal assistance task number 6, revision and editing suggestions, showed us that you can have generative AI review draft proposal narrative and either revise it or, alternatively, give you a list of suggestions for changes to be made. For proposal assistant task number 7, question answering and clarification, all of the chatbots performed well. It shows that we could give context and have generative AI come up with reasonable, responsive answers to questions. And proposal assistant task number 8, formatting and presentation, all of the chatbots made suggestions, both limitations, because the inputs to the generative AI don't include information on, for example, color and graphics. So all the chatbots responded with caveats that they're unable to do everything that would be required for a complete formatting and presentation review session. Our experience from the last year and a half of using generative AI to work on proposals, as well as the benchmarking study results that I've just summarized for you, led us to come up with a roadmap for adoption of generative AI in your proposal operations. This roadmap is not a CIO roadmap on the IT deployment, installation, and maintenance of the capability. Rather, it's from the business developer, capture manager, and proposal manager point of view. To bring generative AI into your enterprise, there are 3 keys you need to address. First of all, you need to be able to address the change in culture required to adopt GenAI and get maximum value out of it. Generative AI is not a database, nor is it a software engine, nor is it a spreadsheet. It is a creative writing tool that is a language prediction engine. Training and practice time for your people will be essential in order for you to realize the value from your investment in generative AI. You're also going to want to consider training on live bids so people are committed to learning to use the tool quickly and effectively. We also believe that a critical mass of people is needed. It'd be hard to bootstrap an entire enterprise ability to adopt generative AI by training a few of your folks in-house and then have them try to evangelize that with your workforce. You must also understand risks to the corporation. Generative AI has significant limitations as well as amazing capabilities. Those limitations give people pause, rightly so. You need to make sure that people like your CIO, your chief financial officer, your contracts executive, your HR department understand what generative AI is, how it works, and what its limitations are, and what that means to the workforce and from a corporate, financial, and legal exposure point of view. And then finally, you need to be able to develop a return on investment calculation that shows that the cost to acquire, use, and maintain generative AI is justified in terms of the savings you realize from productivity enhancement and presumably increased win rate from higher quality. Now here's our roadmap for generative AI adoption from the point of view of people working in the business development program. And again, this is not a sequential set of tasks. It is a list of tasks that need to be performed. One of the first things you need to develop inside your enterprise is a common understanding of what generative AI is, how it works, and what its limitations are. That understanding needs to start with your executive leadership team and make its way throughout your company. If you're going to overcome reluctance to change in the enterprise, you need to make sure that those people who are invested in the success of enterprise understand what they are buying into. So you need to understand the current state of the industry and the need for transformation. AI can be a competitive differentiator, but you need to make sure people understand both its capabilities and limitations. You need to define a value proposition, what you hope to accomplish that improves the company when you adopt generative AI. You need to be able to quantify tangible outcomes and benefits, the productivity gains you hope to achieve, the improvement in win rate you hope to achieve, and the improvement in personnel job satisfaction and retention that you hope to achieve. From that, you can build a business case to show your chief financial officer that it makes sense to invest the time and effort in generative AI. You need to consider the acquisition model for the AI platform. Are you going to buy it as software as a service? Are you going to buy a platform that you will take ownership of and maintain? You need to understand the hidden and overt costs in that acquisition. And you need to be able to calculate a time to break even for when those gains you receive in your enterprise overcome the costs incurred. You need to assess your current operations. You may want to develop a BD maturity model. A BD maturity model shows the different levels of repeatability, analysis, and optimization in your business development, capture, and proposal program. You can use it to identify those areas where the greatest improvement can be realized by adopting generative AI. You can identify those injection points and objectives, make those changes in your proposal process to take maximum advantage of generative AI capabilities. You need to also understand impact on the IT environment in general, and the readiness of your corporate data, your knowledge repository for AI access and adoption. We'll talk about that some more in a few minutes. You need to prepare your workforce for change that comes with adoption of generative AI. Again, it is unlike any other tool they will have used. It's not a word processing engine. It's not software. It's not a database. It's creative and it speaks to you. It's conversational if it's a chatbot. So you're going to want to apply principles of organizational change management in order to make that change as seamless and as accepting as possible for your workforce. And that means frequent targeted communications, an immersion program on live bids for highly motivated people to quickly learn and master the capabilities, continuous learning, building an AI language that you're fluent in, and making sure that you look at how GenAI can be extended across the enterprise. Our focus here today is on business development, capture, and proposal-related work. But the fact is that any knowledge worker will be able to make good use of generative AI for its synthesis, analysis, and writing capabilities. You're going to want to select an AI platform. Your CIO will be deeply involved in this process because it needs to integrate into your enterprise IT environment. It might be on-premise. It might be in your virtual private cloud. It could be in the vendor's virtual private cloud instance. But you'll want to compare features and functionality. You're going to need to understand the security exposure. You're going to look at the cost involved in both setup, installation, and continuing maintenance. And you're going to want to pilot that platform. Let your people try it out and see if you like the platform in an example case. You're going to want to be able to identify and address risks and issues. And to do that, you'll obtain buy-in from critical influencers, your chief financial officer, your chief information officer, the legal team that might be concerned with the legal implications of using generative AI when there's currently a lawsuit from the New York Times against OpenAI and Microsoft on questions of training data and plagiarism. Your contracts executive who might be concerned about what future government regulations and restrictions might come to pass, and your risk management team that might be concerned with reputational and other risks. You're going to want to integrate AI into your process workflows. You already have a portfolio of best practices based on the experience you've gained doing capture and proposals. A lot of times those lessons are hard-won, blood, sweat, and tears that have led you to improve how you do things. You're going to want to take your GenAI platform and use it and adapt it to your company best practices. The GenAI works for you. You're going to want to be able to engage it in such a way that it does things the way you want. You may need a phased approach as you build a prompt library and other capabilities necessary so that AI is institutionalized the way you want it to be. And then you're going to want to set metrics and KPIs, key performance indicators, so you can measure the progress you're making in adopting GenAI and realizing the savings and efficiencies that you've been looking for. So you're going to want to track delivery of improved performance over time. You're going to look at your learning curve. You're going to look at data that both is in anticipation of, at, and after proposal award, so you can understand the implications and the ultimate return on your investment. So some predictions for how we think generative AI in GovCon is going to change over the next few years. Now, I will say my crystal ball is really no better than anyone else's. The field is moving at an astonishing pace. What are we seeing in government agency use of generative AI? Now, I don't have firsthand knowledge of this, but it's my understanding that the government is using generative AI to draft solicitation documents. That is presumably in support of the government acquisition professionals will be the final personnel to review and approve the ultimate product that is released to industry. My understanding is that the government agencies are experimenting with some proposal evaluation tasks, such as compliance checking. My personal opinion is that the current generation of tools are not at a stage where you could just turn them loose and have them do a best value determination of proposal awards. But it certainly can be a tool that helps you with the mechanics of assessing whether or not, for example, a proposal is compliant. We expect that the government was going to continue to discourage industry from submitting compliant but relatively undifferentiated GenAI prepared proposal content. It will become cheaper for companies to generate proposals that are compliant and responsive. But again, our job as industry professionals is to give the government the best of our value. We need to write proposals that are compelling. Today's GenAI does not write proposals that are compelling. Rather, it gives you, the proposal expert, inputs that you can work with to speed your process for writing winning, compelling proposal content. You're going to continue working with your industry CIO, general counsel, and chief financial officer to obtain buy-in for the use of generative AI. That has continued because, again, the field is changing so rapidly. It's my recommendation that you prohibit in your company the use of public platforms where the vendor can and will record your interaction with the generative AI. You don't want to expose your proprietary data to public generative AI platforms unless you have contractual assurance those platforms do not record and retain your proprietary information. It will be important for your company to realize that you can have GenAI hosted in the security of your virtual private cloud or on-premise, or potentially in a vendor virtual private cloud. And then ultimately develop a cost versus performance versus risk trade space for the cost, use, and value gain from using GenAI for business development. A few more predictions for AI and GovCon. You're going to continue to see rapidly evolving technology and design. Even in the last few weeks, we've seen major models come to market, like from Mistral, the French company, for example. You're going to continue seeing advances in how large language models, which form the core of the calculation engine inside the generative AI platform, become more highly networked, more capable, more complex, more high performing. There's lots of emphasis in the industry right now on improving the logic and reasoning capabilities of these platforms. Right now, for example, generative AI does not inherently know the difference between fact and fiction. Large language models understand the statistical relationships between words. It understands when words follow each other, when words continue with each other. Logic and reasoning is embedded in language, but it is not only based in language. So the foundational model developers are working hard to add logic and reasoning to generative AI. You'll see the proliferation of AI assistance agents, specialty applications in your GenAI environment that can be readily customized to your processes and individuals. You're going to see greater use of multimodal GenAI, where you receive input in one form, like a text input, and you receive output in a different form, like a video clip or a briefing deck. You're going to see increased integration with products that government agencies typically use. And you can see improvements in how we find and search our corporate data repository for the information we want. Today, there are techniques that range from semantic search, which is knowledge-based, but not language search. It's search for meaning of your corporate data repository, bringing back snippets of relevant information and the sources. That can range all the way to the opposite extreme, about you training the model on data from your corporate data repository. They have very different cost versus performance trade-offs. Those techniques will continue to evolve and improve. But in general, all of these predictions are subject to change. Lofeld Consulting Group can help you with your generative AI adoption. We have a Power User Immersion program, a 6-week program that is designed to help your professionals learn and use generative AI to do proposal work on a live bid under the supervision of 2 proposal subject matter experts who are highly proficient in generative AI. We have our 3-day class, Generative AI for Proposal Professionals, and we've trained over 100 Lofeld Consulting proposal consultants in how to use generative AI to generate high-quality, winning proposal content. And of course, Lofeld Consulting Group will continue to be a premier capture and proposal services consulting firm, ready to help you with your capture and proposal development needs.
Thanks so much, Bruce. We received a lot of questions from our webinar participants, so let's turn to those right now. All right, so if we don't get to all of the questions during this session, we will address them in upcoming blog posts, so be sure to check our website and e-briefs for those answers. So on to the questions. Is the focus of GenAI for proposal development focused mainly on supporting non-proposal development professionals, or does it also seek to help professional proposal managers and writers?
Yeah, I think the answer is it helps both. For people who are, for instance, technical experts, subject matter experts, who have deep knowledge of a particular domain, who are now supporting proposal activity, but may not be that heavily trained or experienced in proposal-related work, GenAI is still a powerful tool. It enables them to come up with ideas, to formulate those ideas into meaningful proposal content, which will, follow the guidance that you give to generate high scores, for example. At the same time, your proposal professionals who do things like editing, proposal management, proposal coordination support can benefit from the writing capabilities, the review capabilities, and the editing capabilities of GenAI. So really, it applies to both. I think the key is that your subject matter experts, the folks who are not proposal professionals per se, need to have training in your proposal best practices. And also everybody working the bid is going to need some at least minimal proficiency training in how to use GenAI effectively, and in particular to understand how to overcome its limitations.
And it's not just a one-time training, it's continuous practice from my experience.
Yeah, it really is a matter of building proficiency through practice. So yeah, there are classes that you can offer. You can do, as we talked about our Power User Immersion program, you just spent 6 weeks under the guidance of 2 experts. But really, you're going to continue using it, and you'll find that your people can ascend the learning curve quickly, but people can quickly learn to do very powerful, complex things with GenAI.
Mm-hmm. That's been my experience. All right. Are OpenAI's ChatGPT or other generative AI platforms mature enough to produce viable proposal templates given an RFP? If so, can ChatGPT or others then populate the template with appropriate content if given company capabilities statements, win themes, and other content?
Yeah, I think generative AI can certainly generate the inputs for templates. We've written prompts that do that. We have some best practices and templates that we follow at Lofeld. We repeatedly demonstrate that you can write engineered prompts and use chain of thought, which are prompting techniques, to get GenAI to generate the information you need to populate the templates. I'm less optimistic currently about the current generation of tools to do things like generate templates from scratch, to give them a set of guidance and say, "Now create a template, it can do it." I think that requires more human intervention because the tools aren't that strong yet on reasoning and logic and kind of how to structure data for the greatest visual impact. So I think you can get suggestions, recommendations from GenAI, but I don't know if it's really the right tool to go and design templates, for example.
Okay. How can company proposal information be kept proprietary in the AI space?
That's a great question, and it is a foundational question. Every company has the same concern about their proprietary data being protected, and we referenced that, briefly in the briefing you just saw in the webinar deck. There are different architectures that are designed to make sure that a user of GenAI's proprietary data is protected. Now, the cautionary note that we repeatedly emphasize to all of our clients is, don't put your proprietary data into a public platform. And I hold up ChatGPT as an example because I think we've probably all heard of it. But really, almost all of the public platforms record your data. They may not be training the model on it, but they will record that data and the response for training future models. So once you've put your proprietary data out there into a public platform, your data is now largely, out there in the wild and might appear someday and be available to your competitors. So our recommendation is just don't do that. And likewise, private data as well, personal data or PII. Again, you don't want to put into a public platform. There are a couple exceptions. For example, Microsoft Copilot for Enterprise is a GenAI. But if you have it for your enterprise, you have an agreement with Microsoft for your data not to be retained and to be used to train future models. So that gives you that assurance of security, your data is protected. But generally speaking, public platforms are recording your data. The private platforms have architectures that are specifically designed to allow GenAI to access your proprietary data without it being leaked or corrupted. Those platforms can be hosted in your company's virtual private cloud. They could be installed into your company's on-premise IT information system. And some of the vendors offer actually their own hosting of virtual private cloud, where you can then use software as a service, and you can upload selected portions of your corporate proprietary data. And that data can then be processed and used by the GenAI to generate high-quality proposal content. My opinion is that GenAI without access to your private data, your proprietary data, can write compliant and partially responsive proposal content, but it's not going to write winning bids for you. To do that, you need to get the information that makes your company's value proposition and differentiation readily obvious and high scoring. To do that, GenAI needs access to your proprietary data. And in order for that to happen, you need to create a secure IT environment in which the GenAI is hosted.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Does GenAI have the ability to create a keystone or OV1 graphic from written narrative?
Yeah, not to my knowledge today. I've worked with one of the public platforms, DALL-E 3, which is by the same organization, OpenAI, that makes ChatGPT as well. And I've tried to give it instructions on how to do an OV1 or similar like orals type deck chart development. It doesn't do it very well. It's not very good at locating the content. I find that words are misspelled, the graphics don't make sense, stuff like that.
Right.
What
And
GenAI can do for you is give you thoughts on what should go into each chart. So one of the features available today is you can ask GenAI to develop a proposal outline for you and list all the charts and kind of the key points you want to make on each chart. And then you can ask it to expand in words, verbally, what will go into each chart. And then you can turn that over to a graphics artist to kind of do the work and kind of do that right the first time. Graphics, as you know, are a very powerful medium. There are lots of dimensions of ways you can convey information in graphics. Not only the words on the page, but shape, position, color, connection, positioning, all those sorts of things. I don't think GenAI today does a very good job of accepting a text input that can work with all these different dimensions of information and generate what you would consider a high proposal quality graphic. Now, I will say GenAI does do tables really well. So if you're interested in graphic tables, if that's what you consider a graphic element, yes, GenAI can certainly do that for you, and it can generate high quality briefing outlines.
yeah, and we've had good success internally using it to brainstorm content for graphics based on text. So that's another use. What is an AI assistant or agent, and what types of capabilities does it add to a core AI system?
So AI agents are a popular emerging topic right now. And I will say I'm not a technical expert in generative AI. I come at it really more from the user point of view. But as I understand it, the industry is evolving rapidly to create for their commercial customers the ability to model and implement workflows with generative AI. And that would be an AI agent that does that. An AI assistant is a similar concept. You can create and store a complex set of prompts and language-based instructions for a GenAI, which you then hit a button and it goes through a series of steps. It might give you a menu with options to select and say, I want to do this, or I want to do, an alternative, and take you down different paths. So it enables you to have some control logic over an automated interaction with the GenAI platform. So these are emerging capabilities. I think they'll be largely dependent on really improving some of the logic and reasoning capabilities that we see already, but are continuing to mature in the GenAI platforms.
Thank you. Can GenAI be used to assist in other documentation, such as memos, verification reports, etc.?
Absolutely. We've talked only today about GenAI from looking through a keyhole at its business development application, really, and largely focused on proposal work, since that is where we've spent the most of the last year supporting our clients. Having said that, it's immediately usable across the entire enterprise. There are AI platforms out there in the public domain that talk about doing things like code development, writing security plans, doing CMMI, all different kinds of things. My view is, as an executive working in the industry, I use GenAI to do all kinds of things. So the briefing you're looking at today, I designed with the help of GenAI. It's a very powerful medium for writing. I know one of the first exercises I did in a class learning about GenAI was, let's write a security plan for your AI installation and deployment. So again, it does a very good job. I will say it doesn't generate in any of these cases what I consider finished product. If you're using GenAI, you need to still be the owner of the output, because GenAI will give you great input. It will generate high quality draft content really fast and really well to save you a lot of time, especially if you're starting from a blank piece of paper. But at the end of the day, you need to take over at about 70–80% completion and tuning of that product and finish it yourself to make sure the message is being conveyed the way you want. Now, to kind of additional consideration raising the question, you may be familiar with Microsoft Copilot for Enterprise, which is a GenAI product that is fully integrated with the Microsoft Office suite of products. That's an example what we're seeing more and more of. So you bring up Outlook, you'll see a prompt. You can use Copilot to help you draft an email. Okay, it'll do that very nicely for you. What the product does not do yet, by the way, is PowerPoint charts. I know we all want that, the ability to generate high quality graphics and briefing decks. I don't think Copilot's quite there yet, although again, in 2 years, it may be fully integrated to reach that point. But you have access in the Microsoft Office product suite. And by the way, I'm not advertising. I get no benefit from you buying Microsoft Copilot. Let me just make that clear. But it's a great example of how GenAI can be deeply embedded in and integrated with an Office product suite.
Right, and it can do a lot of heavy lifting. Our lessons learned report that's available on the website, there were about 40 people whose testing and lessons learned were in PowerPoint presentations back to the team. I exported the contents of those into our AI model and asked it to summarize, list, and do a lot of the heavy lifting of putting that bulk of material into something that I could then write against. So it did not write the report for me, but it saved me a lot of copying, pasting, sorting, thinking time, and got me a good, excuse me, a good start on that report. So think of, just think outside the box on how you could use this, but it's definitely not just for proposals. It's for everything ancillary to that.
Yeah, Beth, I think you made a good point too that I want to elaborate on. I want to make clear that Lowfeld Consulting does not sell an AI platform. We are not a developer or a vendor for AI. So we do training on it. We provide trained professionals who know how to use it in a proposal or capture environment. But I'm not here, here to sell you a GenAI platform. So we come at it, I think, from a reasonably agnostic and independent point of view as to platforms and how you use them.
Though I do have my favorite, so email me if you want to know my favorite public one. All right. I'm going to sort of paraphrase this question. Would it be possible to rewrite in one voice a proposal volume or proposal text using AI?
Well, the answer is absolutely yes. AI not only writes really well, but you can tell it, you can, instruct it, I should say, into what voice and tone and style that you want. And you can actually give it samples of what you like, have it process the sample, and then help you write a prompt that will then write new text or review and edit text in that style that you like so much. So that's all readily at your fingertips. I will say that there is a limitation. You can only put so much information into what's called the context window of the GenAI. The amount of input it can process is limited, and it varies from platform to platform. It's an amount that's constantly growing. So you can revise text, but for instance, I wouldn't take like a whole 200-page technical volume, try to dump it in and say, now please rewrite this in a particular tone. Probably gonna have to break that up into pieces. I also saw a recent article that talked about how as the context window grows and you put more information in, the GenAI is very, very sensitive and responsive to the information that's kind of at the beginning of the request, and then kind of the attentiveness and attention being paid to the information as you get toward the back end of the request becomes less and less. The developers are aware of that now. Apparently, I imagine there'll be measures taken to address that. But again, one caution on it is you might put your 100-page text volume in there and say, please rewrite this. It'll do a great job at the beginning, but you may find that it slacks off and you're not getting the same quality of response as you get toward the end of it. I've also seen GenAI platforms that just truncate. You ask for a review of a 20-page paper. It does a great job on the first 10 pages and then kind of just says, I'm done here. I've heard, ChatGPT likened to a lazy teenager is what I've heard. So each of these platforms has its own kind of personality and style that you have to get used to. One of the areas they're all sensitive to is how much content are you putting it in and asking it to process.
And play with that, because I love to try and break systems. So I've been stress testing a lot of the public models and seeing which can take hundreds of pages of literally of context. And there's a couple out there now that I've successfully not broken when I've asked it to do something huge, and I got acceptable results. But I think you'll agree, Bruce, try the same prompts, try the same actions multiple times, because you'll get a different result every time.
Yeah, one of the experiments we did early on was seeing if we could write prompts that worked on multiple platforms. We found that every platform responds differently to the same language. Again, all these platforms, they're trained on language data. Their body of knowledge is extracting information about the words being used and how they're being used in relationship to each other. Again, these GenAI platforms, they're not databases. They're not, just retrieving facts. Okay, they're looking really at how words relate to each other. They're language driven. And so it's really important that you write prompts that get the generative platform to work the way it is designed to work or intended, or the way you want it to work, given its design. Let me put it that way. So again, that's something you'll have to experiment with and practice with as well.
Right. It's also great if you can give it examples of what good looks like in writing style. I've done that a lot, where I've given it examples of previous articles, reports, such, and told it to write in that style. And then you get something back that is more similar to what you may be looking for. Great question, great comment. Where did you get the fabulous graphics in these presentations?
So our graphics artist is using GenAI, a GenAI graphics platform. It's the one that integrated with Adobe Acrobat. Is that Firefly, Beth? Is that correct?
I believe she's using Firefly.
Yeah.
Yep. But I had to pass that along. Thank you.
I agree. I think we get great graphics. So in the training class we have lots of images of robots doing things. It's really very clever, especially the coffee break.
Right. Let's see. We're going to wrap it up with this last question, and I think you can speak to this for a bit, Bruce. How do you differentiate your AI generated proposal from all the others using the same AI tool?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, let me say that you can run the same request on the same AI platform and get different language and different response, but the underlying meaning will be very, 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 very similar. And the words will be similar, but not the same. Okay, so that's your point is well taken that, if we suddenly inundate, the government with 10 proposals, all of them written by the same AI platform, they will see a lot of overlap and similarities in the language being used to respond. Okay, so that's, a legitimate concern that the government has, that they're going to be, because you can write proposals faster, better, cheaper now, everyone's going to write more. And I've heard of one bid where recently the government received so many offers that they actually had to cancel a solicitation. They reissued it as a small business set aside. So that's, some anecdotal information for you there. That's a thing the government is going to have to work on. My prediction for what that's worth is that the government's going to start doing some things that are designed to prevent themselves from having to sit there and constantly edit and review proposal documents that have been written by GenAI. I don't see how they can prohibit it because AI is out there all over the place, and GenAI is going to be absolutely commonplace. And so and the generation of people we have coming into the workforce now, and the coming generations will be very, very comfortable. GenAI is going to be a tool in their toolbox. For us, of a certain number of years of experience, we've got to adapt and change. For the generation coming in, it'll be integral to what they do already. I expect the government to do more what I would call gating proposals, where you might have multiple gates you have to go through. So the first gate might be, is your company of a certain size, it doesn't meet certain objective criteria, and only then we allow you to submit a complete management and technical approach. So that's one thought. I think we'll see the government doing more oral evaluations so they can see your project team in action personally. So now it's not so much about GenAI, it's about your people and do they really know their stuff. And by the way, having said that, GenAI can help you write oral scripts and generate practice questions for your project team and emulate the review that's being done by the government. So you'll have ways to improve your project team's ability to deliver that presentation. But at the end of the day, the government will see your people in action. I think we may see some attempts to use plagiarism detection tools. I don't know if that's going to work very well because GenAI is writing creatively. It's not quoting from documents. And so, I don't know how you, apply a plagiarism detection tool to that. And I know there are tools out there that ostensibly are designed to detect GenAI, but the pace of evolution of the platforms is so fast, I don't know if it's even worth the trouble to create such a tool, let alone try to implement it on a scale of, the government in evaluating proposals. So the government's got a predicament on their hands. It will be a lot cheaper and easier for us to generate boilerplate. I think the challenge will be is that you've got to be able to write proposals that show off your differentiation. If you're using GenAI just to write a bunch of boilerplate and turn it in, okay, you may be compliant, you may be responsive, you will rarely be differentiated. So you're not going to win anyway. I think the government then is going to place more emphasis in the evaluation process on finding what makes you different and better than your competitors, and not just, checking off the blocks. Did we, were you compliant? Were you responsive? I don't know, Beth, you want to add anything onto that?
I think our strength-based winning plays a lot into it. Good proposal development practices plays a lot into this. AI is a tool in your proposal development toolkit. It's not going to write the winning proposal for you. It's going to help you write the winning proposal. All right, with that, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And again, we will send everybody an email with a link to the YouTube channel where you can go and watch the replay and also watch replays and other videos. We're constantly putting new content out there, so please join us there and subscribe. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye.